Awesome. Welcome. Today we are here with Kelly Trach talking about how to unleash your genius and turn it into a career or a business or a side hustle. And Kelly Trach is a four-time entrepreneur, business coach, and author of P.S. You're a Genius, an unconventional guide to finding your innate gifts, even when you feel like you don't have, even when you feel like you have none. As a business coach, Kelly helps visionaries find their genius and monetize it so they can build a digital business. She hosts the Kelly Trach Show podcast, which has had more than 100,000 downloads, and is the creator of Your Conscious Empire, a course that teaches people how to build a business based on their genius. Kelly, I am so excited to connect with you again. It's been years since we've seen each other in person due to all of the coronavirus excursions. And welcome today. And I would love to start by hearing from you some of your story of how you got to where you are today with turning your genius into 4 different businesses and now helping others do the same.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me, Nicole. It's such a pleasure to speak to your community. So I'm so grateful and honored that you reached out. So whenever I kind of chat about me and my journey, I always like to rewind and go back to high school and say I was like your classic overachiever. I did all the things. I worked super hard. I got into one of Canada's best business schools, worked my butt off. I had 2 job offers at the end of business school, and I didn't really like either of them. So I was like, okay, what could I do with my time instead? And I was like, well, I've always wanted to try entrepreneurship. So I'm young, why not just move to San Francisco and see if I can start a tech startup? So that's kind of what I did. And I ended up starting Tech Startup One, and I got into a very fancy pre-accelerated program taught by like a billionaire venture capitalist. And I was getting all this support and mentoring and help, and Startup One failed. And then I tried again with Startup Two, and Startup Two failed. And then I had a third startup, and it also failed. And I was so frustrated because I was like, my usual tactics of trying harder, building these really difficult things, like chasing that like shiny, chasing that shiny penny, like all these tactics that had gotten me so far in life of like just trying to be good at everything and trying to solve the hardest problems were not paying off when I needed it to pay off the most. So I had this like week-long vacation when I flew back from San Francisco back to Canada, where I'm from. And I was in my long-term partner at the time's family cabin, and it was kind of in the middle of nowhere in the woods. And I was like, okay, I have a week off. I'm going to try to think about what I'm going to do with my life. My startups aren't working. Do I go back to trying to get like a corporate job? Do I like email back the companies that offered me jobs at one point and be like, hey, can I come back? And I had woke up one morning and I made myself a cup of coffee. I went down to sit in this like old, like lazy boy reclining red chair. I kicked my feet back and I looked out the window, and I heard this sort of intuitive question pop into my head. And it just said, Kelly, what if you just did what you were good at? And this was like a question that was just groundbreaking to me because it was something I had never considered before in my life. Like, just do what I was good at. I was always aiming to do the hardest, most difficult things, to prove myself, to strive. So I thought, okay, well, what would I be good at? Like, what could I do that's natural and easy for me? And because I had already tried so many times of building businesses the opposite way, I was like, let me just try one more time. Let me build a 4th business and center around something that's easy and natural to me. So at the time, the only thing I really knew was my health journey and my autoimmune condition and my celiac disease, my IBS. And I was like, okay, I'll make like a health blog. And that really pivoted into a lot of like mindset focused work. And I had started my podcast, and I had a website, and I had little programs and online courses. And then people started saying, hey, you've built an online business. Can you help me? And my first response was, no, you don't want my help. Like, despite going to business school, I had like 3 failed startups. Like, I'm not the right person to ask, but I had one client that was very persistent. And sometimes our genius is just under the tip of our nose. And long story short, I've been a business coach ever since. So one of the things that people would always come to me for and hire me for, because I really focus on helping people find their genius and turn it into like a soulful digital business where they're selling one-on-one services and online courses, and hopefully grow it to like full-time income. But people would always come to me because they would say, well, what can I sell? What can I uniquely offer? And that was always a question I'd be getting. And I was like, oh, well, let me just ask you kind of a series of questions around me trying to figure out what their genius was. And I would try to understand, what are you innately good at? What comes to you that's really easy? What do people come to you for? And I would just sort of ask this set of questions to help them figure out what I would call their genius and turn that into something to offer. So when I had seen my clients get really good results, like being able to quit their full-time jobs and go full-time for themselves, or out earn their corporate salaries by the end of their first year in business, or be able to open up shop and score a paid speaking gig at Google within literally 1 month of running their business. I realized I was kind of onto something special around this idea of framing a business around your genius, because this was something I kind of fell into. Like with most things in my life, I've kind of fallen into it. But that framework became very popular. I turned it into a piece of my core curriculum inside my main course called Your Conscious Empire. It kind of got the same rave reviews of people being like, in the past, I was unsure about what I was supposed to do. And this really supported me in figuring out like what I could uniquely sell and help me like squash that imposter syndrome. And in 2019, I was like, I've got this concept around find your genius and turn it into something. And I applied for a TED Talk and I didn't get it. I was like, you know what? Let me see if I could get a book deal. And I did. And then I got PS Your Genius, which came out last year, which is about really my framework of how you find your genius and turn it into a business, a career, or a side hustle. So in a nutshell, that's how I got to where I am today.
I love it all. And it was so fun seeing your book journey too, and watching that along the way and being like, oh, I applied to all these different things and you kept going and you stuck with it. And that was really fun. So really celebrating that as well.
Thank you.
And I love this aspect and your take and your approach in business coaching, because a lot of business coaches will come in and be like, this is what to say, this is how you do it. And it doesn't actually feed into the soul and the genius of that person. And so when I'm sure you've experienced with your clients, and I'm curious around when someone comes to you and they maybe aren't quite sure of what they're good at because they have what is called like soft skills in the corporate world around their, like, whether it's a coach or something that's not necessarily like a product in the sense of like a tangible, like this is what you get when you buy the thing. What has been your experience and or with your clients around finding their genius when it is in those listening skills and really helping people around their blind spots and different things like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when it comes to our genius, it's usually, like I said, it's kind of like under the tip of our tongue, or sometimes we just have a hard time owning our gifts and claiming our gifts. So let me quickly define what I mean when I say genius. I describe it as when you take your top 3 to 5 most innate gifts and perform a task that involves all of them at once, you create world-class work doing something only you can uniquely do. And I differentiate the word strength from gift. So here are my definitions. A strength is something you're strong at, but implies that there could be room for improvement. Yeah, a gift it's a gift that we have that's innate. Like you could do it for me right now on the spot with like no thought or preparation. We really want to focus on your gifts because you can have a lot of things you're great at and a lot of strengths, but we want to focus on those innate gifts because when we take those, that's what makes it for like an expression of genius. So for example, my best gifts are speaking, teaching, creating, and connecting. And when I do tasks, they're like coaching a client or doing a podcast interview or leading a workshop. Those are outcomes of genius, I would say, where I feel like I'm in the flow, time stops, I'm yielding great results for other people, I'm having fun at the same time. And you really feel like you're in that magic zone. So that's how I would describe genius. So when I'm working with clients and they're not really sure what they're good at, I'd say first and foremost, most people have a hard time understanding, like, what am I really good at? Because there's so much conditioning. We get like feedback from work, or we hear different inputs from other people. But I really kind of describe that your genius is really as personal as your fingerprint, and it's up for you to decide. So I usually walk clients through a series of questions. It's the same questions that are in my book around helping them understand, how do your idols illuminate your gifts? AKA like, who do you really look up to and what are their gifts and what gifts are those like reflecting back to you? Because I really believe what we like about others is what we like about ourselves. Or what are you great at that nobody taught you how to do? Or what have you been unconsciously doing for a really long time? Like if we look back at all of your past work experiences, what recurring traits have always been there? I know for me, I was always in teaching roles. And I didn't know I was good at teaching or gifted at teaching. But like when I looked at the lens of like my resume, I was like, oh, I've been doing this for like 10 years. I'm always teaching something. So that's usually how I would be supporting clients, is recognizing that, most of us come into it feeling like there's nothing special about us, or we're not really sure what we're really great at. But it's really about listening to those intuitive answers that come up quickly in response to like the guiding kind of 10 questions that are in the book or in a coaching session around just helping people kind of answer the question, or helping people get to the answers around helping them understand what those innate gifts are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love your differentiation of that. That's a tough word for me today for some reason.
It's okay.
But I love that because I think people are so, like you were saying, like that chasing the accolades and the success and the shiny penny, and you get so good at being a good student and
Yeah.
learning and doing what other people tell you to do, that those are learned skill sets. However, your innate genius and your gifts, that your soul, that your unique journey is here to express, are two different things. So, and you can weave them together in order to create a business, all of that. I love that so much. So thank you for the differentiation.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm curious, in that, with that, there is a lot of doubts that come up. So how do you work with people on ditching the doubts? Because that is a big one for anyone starting out in anything new, especially if you're type A or perfectionist. Like, you want to be good at it, you want to be efficient. And when there's all these doubts of, I don't know how to do this yet, or what if I don't know what my gifts are, or those kinds of things. So how do you work with your clients on that?
Yeah. So in the book, I outlined some of the top doubts that I had myself and the ones that I would see clients have all the time. Cause it's like, you have this innate genius, and I believe that you're already amazing at it. Like, you do not need to proverbially like sharpen the saw to get better at it. Like, you could just do it for me now and you're already strong at it. But we have doubts like, I can't do that, or somebody's already doing it, so I really can't, or I can't make money doing that, or what I have is not good enough. I need more time, experience, another certification or degree. Or other doubts like, I need to move to Bali, which is like, I need a whole different set of conditions before I start this. So when it comes to those doubts, I always like to think about, usually when working with the clients, like, which specific doubt is it? Or like, which one is like the most pressing, and then kind of go through like a series of things. So usually one that comes up a lot is, the feeling of like, what I have isn't enough and I need more. So we'll take the example of like, I need more time, experience, or certifications. I have like two little tools that I like to teach. One is taking the flip perspective, which is what I call it. So instead of saying things like, I need 10 years to launch a business, I'm going to get 10 years of corporate experience under my belt and then launch business. Let's flip that on its head and say, well, what if you had to launch by the end of the month? Like, what if we just challenge your perceptions and looked at it differently? Like, what would you do? And then it kind of gets the ball rolling of like, okay, if I had to launch by the end of the month, what would I do? Or if you want to apply for this job and, you're like, oh, I'm going to spend like 2 months making the perfect application. Well, what if you had to get it in by Sunday? Like, what if you just do it now? I like to get people kind of out of that ego and that inner critic, because it will natter to us forever. And I kind of explain in the book, like, the longer you let that inner critic talk to you, there's a higher probability that you won't do the task. But if you have a shorter duration and you force yourself to take action, you have less time to listen to your inner critic, which is something I know, which is a very helpful tool for me, because if I just sit around forever and forever and forever, my inner critic will talk me out of it. But if I have a tight deadline, I'll kind of work through it quickly. So that's sort of one of my favorite tools, is just really flipping the perspective and trying to see if you can change it up. The other perspective I like to offer is this concept I call like inverse thinking, of just like looking at things in the inverse. So it's like, if we feel like, oh, well, everybody who's applying to Google right now, they also have like huge other companies on their resumes. Like, what if I have none of that? Like, what if I've only been at startups? Well, what if, instead of looking at it in that disempowering view, we like invert that thought and think, well, what if that makes you special? Like, what if the fact that you've only worked at startups makes you unique in that pile of resumes, because everybody else has got like big logos, like, Apple and Airbnb, but that makes you unique and stand out. So it's always about challenging your thoughts with the contrary, to kind of liberate yourself of those confined constrictions of time, experience, or degrees, and trying to focus on what you do have and really like amplifying that and leaning into that, as well as taking quick actions to get things like off the to-do list now. So that's just like one way I like to kind of work with one of the doubts.
That's awesome. Yeah. Changing the perspective that we have, and then having those shorter deadlines is so powerful, because when people think they have a year, or I need 10 years more of experience, that's a big one. While I was living in LA, that a lot of creatives, like actors and singers, and they're like, oh, it's the 10-year, they expect to have that, it's going to take them at least 10 years. And I'm like, why? why? You don't need another acting class. You need to go audition
Yeah.
kind of a thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
that shortening the time span, whether it's writing a book or starting a business or launching something, just jumping in and learning as you go and letting it be messy. And that is going to help you build confidence. And when you keep going and shorten that, like you said, like give yourself less time to doubt yourself because that builds momentum. That's so
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah.
And with that, you made a note around this idea that geniuses have a different set of unconventional rules they play by. And I'd love to hear more on what you mean by that and how you use that in your framework as well.
For sure. So I believe when you're working within your genius, it's sort of like the rules don't apply to you. I like to use this visualization. So say you're trying to get into a nightclub. Most people in life are just waiting in line and going and paying the bouncer like $10 to get into the club. But, when we're leveraging our genius, it's sort of like, oh, I know a friend inside that can get me in, or I found this backdoor entrance. And you can kind of get what you want, but in an easier way. It's sort of like you can skip the line, skip the rules. So what does this mean? I think we all know what people are like when they're really doing their genius. Like Steve Jobs had it in like spades. Elon Musk just puts like everybody to shame. Even just like people we know in life where we just see people in their element and it's like they know how to just skip the line, right? I like to believe it's because they're really working within their genius, because when you are doing the thing that only you can do, you can simply do more, create more. You can pull off these amazing feats with like seemingly little effort, and you literally look like a superstar to everybody else, but you're doing it within this place of like ease and flow and fluidity because it's easy for you. So I kind of outlined in the book, there's a couple of different rules that you can be playing by to, once you figure out your genius and live within that genius, like use these set of rules to help you get more quantum leaps in your performance and results. So one of those I really outline is like, it's a chapter called Throw Out Everything You Know and Go With How It Feels, which is my chapter around listening to your intuition. Because a lot of the times geniuses are listening to their intuition and they're honoring those intuitive impulses. And you can simply do more and go further when you are listening to that intuitive voice inside of you. Another thing that I explain is geniuses are also making like quantum leaps, and they're choosing like exponential results over incremental gains. So if we look at math, regular people are doing like 10 plus 10, right? And that looks like improve your weaknesses, learn the Excel formatting so you can save like 5 minutes. You can learn the hotkeys in Excel so you can save like 5 minutes of formatting, get a 2% annual raise. It's always incremental gains. But when you're doing your genius, you can do like 10 squared to like make 100. So in both cases, people have the same input of 10, but you're getting a radically different result. So it's really thinking about how can I use my genius and double down into that to just create way more and just build way more. So really always focus on like, how can I get those exponential results versus just those incremental gains? Because I think that's something that geniuses do a really good job of, is they're always thinking, well, where is the possibility? And like, what's going to give me the biggest yield? And how can I get my eyes on the prize for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And another thing, one more tool I teach in that section is really this concept that I call go for what you want, not what you think you can get, because there's a very different energy between like playing big and going like YOLO, I want this big goal, this big dream, versus shrinking and settling and being small and be like, oh, I'll only get this, or I'll settle for that, or, this is good enough, in terms of goals, aspirations, partners, whatever it is, romantic interests. Geniuses go for what they want, right? Like Steve Jobs knew what he wanted, right? Versus this sort of other narrative that's more low self-worth and lower vibration of like, I'll just like sort of settle for this. So those are some of the little, I call them new school rules for success. Cause like once you know your genius, like go for those exponential results, like listen to your intuition, follow those intuitive impulses because they're usually leading you in the right direction, and go for what you really want, not what you think you can get. And that's kind of how you skip the line in the nightclub and find that backdoor entrance, is because you're doing things that just other people aren't. A lot of these rules have just come from my own life of just my really, I don't know, up and down journey of like, business school and Silicon Valley and learning how, what it takes to kind of get tech startups off the ground, or getting meetings with investors, or just, even trying to get this book deal and this business now. There's so many things I've done in my journey that have been different or unconventional or like perceived to be weird, but we're always like my intuitive instinct or me trying to go for some big goal. And in the end, it all kind of works out, but you have to like lean into your genius and trust the wisdom that you embody.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything you just said. And I love that this piece, it really is about trusting that
Mm-hmm.
the desire of going big. And I think that's where a lot of people give up, is they stop
Mm-hmm.
trusting themselves because it doesn't work as fast as they thought it was
Yeah.
going to. And I
Mhm.
love your story of like, I had 4 businesses before like the book and this one, and getting to see that, where most people think there's like overnight successes, and it's usually not the case.
Totally.
So that piece around sticking with it, trusting yourself, and going for what you really want, and
Yeah.
sticking with it until the things start falling into place and clicking into place. And with that, you had mentioned this red thread to
Yeah.
your genius, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I teach on, once people find their genius in the book, I make them outline what I call their red thread is, because most people feel like they don't have enough experience to do their genius, or they feel like it's not good enough. Um, so I kind of have this visual of like, imagine like a red thread through a sewing needle, and it's kind of woven all of your past life experiences together to arrive you at this point in your lifetime where you are in a unique position where you are designed to do your genius, and you have all this experience to back it up. So if we look at all of your like random odd jobs and past internships, and even the volunteer work you did, or things you learned through your own life, through your trauma, your trials and tribulations, you have got so many data points that uniquely make you qualified to do your genius in your own certain way, right? And when you really honor that, you're going to realize that there's kind of been this red thread weaving through your life this whole time. So many random skill sets that make me amazing as a business coach and as an author, as an entrepreneur, have come from some of those random places that, you know, it is that classic line that Steve Jobs said of like, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. But, you know, like lifeguarding taught me how to be so great under like high pressure scenarios and be good in emergencies. Or I used to sell things. How I funded my San Francisco trip was by flipping stuff on Craigslist online. That taught me so much about online marketing and framing and selling and positioning. Other things like case competitions in business school taught me how to solve a problem, a business problem, in under an hour, and then, you know, be good at presenting to a panel of judges of like, here's the business problem, here's the solutions, here's the implementation plan, which in return is something I do now in real life with clients, right? So it's sort of like when you look back at all your random odds and ends of experience, you're like, wait a sec, it's like I've sewn a whole garment of clothing with this red thread, and I've got all these bits and pieces of fabric that are all my random parts of my journey. But through this red thread combining everything, I can kind of see how my genius comes to form and how I've learned it along the way, and how I am the way I am based on all my past experiences and life experiences and the hard times and the bad times. And it all is combined into the work I do now. And I'm the perfect person to do it. That's how I describe the red thread.
I love that. Yeah, that's so important for people,
Yeah.
whether it's building confidence, seeing their skill
Yeah.
sets, seeing their genius,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how it's all working for you, and how it's
Mm-hmm.
all really building you up to where you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So I love that so
Yeah.
much.
Totally.
And you touched a little bit on this earlier, but I want to circle back to this too, around where when we see our idols and see
Yes.
their genius, this is something I learned from one of my mentors. His name's Dr. DeMartini,
Yeah.
and he talks about when certain traits. So whether they're good or bad, all people have all traits. And
Yes.
when we infatuate with someone else's traits, it means we're not owning it in ourselves.
Mm.
And vice versa. If we resent or like hate someone for something, it's because we're not owning where we do the same thing or have that same expression. It's just in a different way. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear your take on when you see an idol and you see them in their mastery and their excellence and what they're really good at, how to start connecting the dots with yourself of being like, either like, wait, I do that too, but it's in a different way, or where you can start to build it up within yourself using your own gifts and genius. And yeah, and your take on that, because I'd love to hear more on what you think of that.
Yeah, for sure. I love that piece. So I really believe that, you know, the genius you see in others and like what you're really drawn to and magnetized is usually like you staring at your own gifts right back at you. Because one of the exercises I make people do in the book, and whenever I'm working with a client privately, I'm always curious, who do you really look up to? Who are your role models? Who do you idolize? So in the book, I say pick 5 people that you admire most. Who have you looked up to the longest? Who do you really respect? Whose word do you just hang on? Why are they so alluring to you? Pick 5 people and then write down 5 reasons why you love each of them. Like what makes them so specifically magnetic to you? So that should give you 25 traits total. And when you look at those 25 traits, there's a very good chance that you are looking at your best gifts right back at you, because the genius we really admire in others is the genius we have inside of ourselves. And one of the fastest way to see your own gifts is to look at the folks you admire and be like, well, what do I like about them? Oh, well, this, well, do I have this inside of me? Very high chance too, because even, Nicole, saying you and I both write down that we like Oprah, for example, the reasons why we would like Oprah would be very different and unique to what would be a reflection about our own talents and gifts. Right. So that's sort of the exercise in a nutshell. I believe the same thing that, Dr. John G. Martini says. It's sort of the way I phrase it is like, what you like about others is what you like about yourself. What you don't like about others is what you don't like about yourself. And what you judge in others is what you judge in yourself. So I always look at other people as a mirror for my own life. And I really noticed this with my work, because in the book, I also say, do the next step of like, figure out the 5 people you would like most, and then write down what are they doing for work and how are they earning an income? And can you make money in the same way? Because if they have similar gifts and geniuses to yours, there's a good chance you get paid to do that. But I really noticed this many, many moons ago. As with all my work, it kind of comes to me in random nuggets of learning. But I had this huge crush on this one dude, and he was sort of like my dream man. His name is Justin Willman. He's a magician and he's a comedian, and he has a Netflix show. He's hilarious. He's super funny. He lives in California, and I was like so like obsessed with him. And I was thinking about it a lot. I'm like, why am I so obsessed with him? I just realized he had a bunch of the things that I wanted and the things that I really liked. I was like, hey, he's got his Netflix show. He lives in LA and he's funny. I'm like, right. Those are some things that I hope I'm semi-funny, and I would love a Netflix show, and I'd love to live in LA. And I realized it's just like him just mirroring back to me things I wanted in my own life, or potentially a gift that I had inside of me. And just thinking about that through that one, Hollywood crush, it helped me it gave me some of the basis of one of the questions that went to the book. So that's kind of the story behind that one. But when we think about it, yeah, it just like, it looks so clear, when we look at things like that,
Absolutely. I do the same thing after working with Dr. John D. Martini, all purposely. My current crush is John Mayer.
Oh yeah, I love John Mayer.
That's what I use. I'm like, okay, what is it about him? And like, yeah, I think he's funny and he's intelligent, and he seems like he's done some great personal development over the years on all the things. So anyway, yeah, and I will purposely. And I love it too, because it takes people off of pedestals and it humanizes both, whether you're infatuated with someone or resenting them. But I really love your take on using it in your business and seeing like, okay, are they doing similar things? Mm-hmm. And what are the things that they're doing that in ways that I want to experience that success or that situation or whatever. So I love that so much. So thank you for the take on that. And yeah, I would love to hear how can people find you? What do you got going on right now? I'll definitely share links for your book and your website and all the things, but I'd love to hear what you got going on and where people can find you.
Yeah, people can find me at kellytrach.com, and I spell my last name Trach. I offer one-on-one private coaching. I have my online self-study courses around how to build digital business, follow my framework, and I have my book, which is it's all there at kellytrach.com. So yeah, the book is wherever books are available, Canada and the US. Walmart, Indigo in Canada, Barnes and Noble in the US, Target, Amazon, all the links are there, as well as the audiobook, which is also available, and the e-copy. The audiobook is narrated by me. So you can listen to me for 6 hours, motivating you if you want it.
I love it. And I'm celebrating the book, and it's so awesome to watch you through that journey too. So thank you so much for being on today and sharing all of your wisdom around everything.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Nicole. It was such a pleasure.
Of course. Pleasure for me too.